Okay, we're going to start with the most basic of sewing projects, sewing on a button. Or actually, not sewing on a button, threading the needle. So that's where we're going to start. I'm doing this on a big scale for you so you can really see what's happening. So we're going to start using embroidery thread and a tapestry needle. You're not normally going to sew buttons on with a tapestry needle and embroidery thread, but it does help you to see what we're doing today when you have to look at it on screen. So I have my tapestry needle and a length, not too long, no more than about 45 centimeters, 18 inches-ish, of 6-strand embroidery floss. It's super thick, but hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing. The first thing we're doing is threading the needle. So if you look, I'm pinching a clean cut piece of thread between my thumb and forefinger, and I'm actually going to lay the eye of the needle onto the thread. So I'm not pushing the thread into the needle, I'm actually laying the eye of the needle onto the thread. It is 100 times easier than trying to push a piece of thread through the eye of a needle. All right, there's different ways we can knot the thread. When you want something to be super secure and make sure it doesn't pull through, we actually make a wrapped knot. So I've crossed the thread on my finger, and with my thumb I'm squeezing and rolling it off, and you see what it does. It sort of wraps the thread around itself a few times, and when you pull down you end up with a big messy knot. But sometimes that's what you want. A big messy knot is actually gonna not come back through the fabric. So sometimes it's okay to have a messy knot. There is another small knot. This is just a standard overhand knot. Very small, very neat, but I'm pretty sure I could pull that right through this fabric, for instance. So this is useful if it's not going to be under any strain. And the other knot I'm going to teach you, I know it as a quilter's knot, and you can make this knot pretty much as big or as small as you want. You make a cross with the thread and your needle. So this is the end that's farthest away from your needle. Make a cross, and you wrap once, twice, or 3 times, but we're just going to do twice just now. And then I'm pinching, if you can see, I'm pinching the wraps, and I'm pulling the needle out while I'm still pinching the wraps. And I'm going to keep pulling. And I've got a kind of a medium-sized knot there. If I'd wrapped 3 times, it would have been a bigger knot. So you can decide how big a knot you want, but it's always going to look nice and neat if the back of your work is as important to you as the front. Okay, we're going to start with a two-hole button, which is, most buttons probably are 2-hole buttons like this. This is a big one so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to bring my needle through from the back at the point that my button is going to sit at. All right, and then I'm going to put the button onto the needle and lay it flat on my fabric. Now I'm going to put the needle down in the other hole and pull it through. And then holding my button, I'm going to put my needle back in as close as possible to where I put it in the first time, and I'll pull through. And I'll check to make sure that I pulled all the way through. And now I'll put my needle back in the second hole again and pull through. Okay, now I normally do 4 stitches through a button when it's just a 2-hole button. That was 3. and this is 4. So that button should be on quite securely. I'm going to come to the back, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to slide my needle under the stitches on the back, and just before I pull it all the way through, I'm going to stop and grab this loop, and then I'm going to put my needle into the loop once and twice, and then I'm going to tug it until it closes up. And cut my thread. Now, that button is on pretty tight and it shouldn't come off. You'll lose buttons on clothes so often because they're put on by machine when you buy things that are commercially made, and there's no locking stitch of any sort. That what I did right there is effectively a locking stitch. There's no locking stitch to hold them on, so eventually they will come off. So that is your 2-hole button. Now I'm going to show you 2 different ways to sew on a 4-hole button. Okay, I'm just going to show you the side-by-side method first. So I'm going to pull my needle through one of the holes in my button, and I'm going to go straight through the one next to it. And because I've got 4 holes, I'm only going to go 3 times instead of 4 through. So this is number 2. And 3. So far, so much the same as how we did the 2. But now I'm going to come out next to it in the other 2 holes, and I'm going to do the same. Back in where I first went through, pull tight, and back down. That's 2. Back in again in the same spot. Alright, I think that's pretty secure. And again, I'm just going to pull through my previous stitches. 1, 2, pull that tight. Now I'm going to show you the cross or X version, and let's bring that through here. My needle, button through my needle, control my thread here, and I'm going to go to the diagonal hole on the button. I'll hold my button tight, and I'm going to put my needle back through again. Two, and again, just 3 each time here. All right, now I'm going to take the needle through one of the empty holes, and again diagonally across. Needle back in the same spot. That's 2. Back in the same spot. And 3, securely attached. Knot my threads again. Pull my needle through. 1, 2, tug to tighten it, and snip my threads. Nice strong button attachment. So the final thing I'm going to show you today is a shank button. Oops, you can tell I'd already sewn this on something else. Final one I'm going to show you today is a shank button. This has what's called a shank here on the back, and you sew it on by sewing through this rather than sewing through the front of the button. So let's go ahead and do that. out where I want my my button to sit. I'm going to line my button up carefully. This one has a crest on it and I want to make sure that it's going straight up and down. So oops. I'm going to put my needle through. Let's count how many times I can drop this. Put my needle through the shank. I will lay the needle down on my fabric, hold it in place, straight up and down. I'm going to have to grip here and pop the needle through right at the other side of the shank. I'm gripping my needle so that I can see the shank. I'll come back through to this side. And now I can feel the shank underneath, so I'm not going back in where I started because that wasn't very good. I'm going to put my needle through and make sure it goes through the shank, which, you know, is a little tricky. There we are. And pull it tight, make sure my button is sitting straight. And I'm going to put my needle back. And pull it tight. Grip again. Pop my needle through. Look through here, I can see it went right through. I can see it's through the shank, so I'm going to pull again. Pull it tight. Now, if this was just a round button with no design on it, you wouldn't have to worry quite so much. Needle back through. Pull it tight. You can see it's still straight. That was 3. This is going to be 4. You can see the needles coming through there. And down. There we go. Finish it off the same way. Run my needle through the stitches. Grab my loop. 1, 2. Snug my knot. And cut my thread. And there we are. It's sitting nice straight up and down. And it's not going to come off. Okay, that's how you sew on buttons. Not so hard, is it?